Welcome to Chapter 1 of Sherlock Holmes, The Case of the Silent Sovereign, a 12-part Sherlock Holmes mystery. Get comfortable, close your eyes, and let the story unfold. Chapter 1. A Summons from the Athenaeum Club. The autumn of 1888 was a season of peculiar tranquility in London, or so it seemed from the warm confines of 221B Baker Street. Outside, the city churned with its usual ceaseless energy, a sprawling beast of industry and empire. But within our lodgings, a comfortable quiet had settled, punctuated only by the rustle of my newspaper and the intermittent bubbling of a strange concoction on my companion's workbench. Sherlock Holmes, a man for whom idleness was a form of torture, had found a temporary reprieve from the crushing boredom that so often plagued him between cases. He was hunched over a series of glass beakers connected by a web of copper wires and glass tubes. His long, thin fingers adjusting a small flame with meticulous precision. He was attempting, he had informed me earlier, to develop a new method for detecting the presence of alkaloids in a solution, one that would be 100 times more sensitive than any existing test. I watched him from my armchair, the very picture of domesticity. The fire crackled merrily in the hearth, casting a warm glow on the familiar clutter of our shared living space. Chemical stains marked the mantelpiece. A stack of unsolved monographs sat precariously on a side table, and Holmes's violin lay propped against the wall, awaiting its master's touch. For a man who thrived on chaos, he had created a space that was, in its own eccentric way, a sanctuary. "Watson, you are staring," he said, without turning around. His voice was calm, almost meditative. "Your gaze is fixed upon my work, yet your mind is 1,000 miles away. You are contemplating the recent article in the Lancet regarding cellular pathology, and you are finding it wanting." I confess I was startled. "Holmes, how on earth could you know that?" He finally turned, a faint, amused smile playing on his lips. "The angle of your newspaper, my dear fellow. You have it folded to the medical section, and your brow has been furrowed for the last 10 minutes. You only adopt that particular expression when you encounter what you consider to be a flawed diagnosis. The article on cellular pathology is the only one in that section of sufficient length and complexity to have held your attention for so long." I chuckled, shaking my head. "As ever, Holmes. You make it sound so simple." "It is simple," he replied, turning back to his experiment. "All life is simple, if one has the eyes to see it. It is the vanity of men that introduces complexity." He fell silent again, and I returned to my paper, though his observation had, as usual, derailed my train of thought. It was in these moments of quiet contemplation that I often found myself reflecting on the extraordinary nature of my friend. The world saw him as a machine, a thinking engine, but I, who had the privilege of sharing his daily life, knew the man behind the intellect. I knew his moods, his passions, his profound sense of justice, and the deep-seated melancholy that was the price of his genius. Our peace was shattered by a sharp, insistent knock at the door. It was too late for a casual visitor, and the sound carried a weight of urgency that was unmistakable. Mrs. Hudson, our long-suffering landlady, soon appeared, her face a mixture of apology and curiosity. "A messenger, Mr. Holmes," she announced, holding out a silver tray. On it lay a single, crisp envelope, sealed with a crest I recognized at once. Holmes straightened up his experiment forgotten. He took the envelope and examined it closely, his eyes narrowing. "The Athenaeum Club," he murmured, breaking the seal with a flick of his thumb. "A place for bishops and men of letters, not the usual source of our clientele." He read the note, his expression growing more intense with each line. It was brief, written in a hurried but elegant hand. When he finished, he handed it to me without a word. The message was a plea, as direct as it was dramatic. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I implore you to grant me a meeting at your earliest convenience. A matter of the gravest importance has arisen concerning the death of my husband, Lord Alistair Finch. The police are satisfied, but I am not. I shall be waiting at the Athenaeum Club. Do not delay. Yours in desperation, Lady Evelyn Finch." "Lord Alistair Finch," I said, looking up at Holmes. "The physicist? The man is a Fellow of the Royal Society. I read of his passing only yesterday. The papers said it was a heart seizure." "The papers say many things, Watson," Holmes replied, his eyes gleaming with a sudden fierce energy. The languor of a moment ago had vanished, replaced by the familiar fire of the hunt. And a widow's intuition is often more accurate than a coroner's report, especially when that widow is a woman of Lady Finch's caliber. He was already shrugging off his dressing gown and reaching for his coat. "Come, Watson, the game is afoot." The journey to Pall Mall was a blur of motion and sound. The hansom cab rattled over the cobblestones, its lamps cutting a swathe through the thick London fog that had descended with the evening. The city was a symphony of muffled sounds. The distant clang of a ship's bell on the Thames, the cry of a newsboy, the rhythmic clip-clop of horses' hooves. It was a world of shadows and secrets, a world where my friend was king. The Athenaeum Club was an oasis of light and order in the heart of this nocturnal chaos. Its grand neoclassical facade loomed before us, a bastion of intellectualism and old-world power. A doorman in a smart uniform ushered us inside, his expression one of polite surprise at the sight of Holmes's unconventional attire. We were led to a private sitting room, a quiet book-lined chamber, where a woman stood waiting by the window, her silhouette framed against the gaslit street outside. As we entered, she turned, and I found myself in the presence of a remarkable individual. Lady Evelyn Finch was a woman in her late 30s, dressed in the somber black of mourning, but there was nothing of the frail weeping widow about her. She was tall and poised, with intelligent grey eyes that met ours with a direct and searching gaze. Her face was pale, but her expression was one of resolute strength, though the dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights and profound grief. "Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice clear and steady, "thank you for coming so promptly." "Lady Finch," Holmes replied, bowing slightly, "I'm at your service. This is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson." She inclined her head in my direction before turning her attention back to Holmes. "I will not waste your time with pleasantries, Mr. Holmes. I am here because my husband was murdered." The word hung in the air, stark and brutal, in the refined elegance of the room. "The police, and indeed the coroner, have concluded that Alistair died of natural causes," she continued, her hands clasped tightly before her. "They say his heart simply gave out. He had been working too hard, they claim. The strain was too much." And you do not agree? Holmes asked, his eyes fixed on her face. I do not, she said firmly. My husband was in perfect health. He was a man of immense energy and discipline. He was on the verge of the greatest discovery of his career. He was not a man to simply stop. She paused, taking a steadying breath. There is more. The circumstances of his death were impossible. Holmes leaned forward, his interest piqued. Pray, tell me everything. Alistair worked in a private laboratory he had built in our home, she began. It was his sanctuary, his fortress. He kept it locked at all times. No one was permitted inside without his express invitation. 2 nights ago he retired to his lab after dinner, as was his custom. He seemed excited, energized. He told me he was on the brink of a breakthrough. Her voice wavered for the first time, a flicker of pain crossing her features. The next morning, he did not appear for breakfast. I went to the laboratory. The door was locked from the inside. I knocked, but there was no answer. I called for our butler, and together we forced the door. She closed her eyes, as if reliving the moment. He was sitting in his chair, at his desk. He looked peaceful, as if he had simply fallen asleep. But he was cold. He was gone. The room was sealed from the inside, you say? I asked, my medical instincts stirring. Was there a window? There is a window, doctor, she replied, turning to me. But it was bolted shut, also from the inside. There is no other entrance. No secret passage, no hidden door. My husband was not a man for such theatrics. The room is on the 2nd floor. The walls are solid brick. And the cause of death? Holmes pressed. That is the most baffling part, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. The police surgeon found nothing. No wound, no sign of a struggle, no trace of poison in his system. His heart had simply stopped. They called it a cardiac arrest, a tragedy born of overwork. But I know my husband, Mr. Holmes. Someone or something killed him. She looked at Holmes, her eyes pleading. The police think I am a hysterical, grieving widow. They pat my hand and offer me condolences, but they do not listen. Will you? Holmes had risen from his chair and was now pacing the room, his hands clasped behind his back. The case had him in its grip. The impossible nature of the crime, the high-stakes world of scientific discovery, the passionate conviction of his client. It was a combination he found irresistible. Lady Finch, he said, stopping before her. You say the room was sealed. Was anything out of place? Anything missing? She hesitated for a moment. The police said no, but I felt something was wrong. A sense of absence. His work papers were on his desk, but they seemed disturbed. Not messy, but as if someone had been searching through them. Holmes's eyes lit up. I see. A locked room, a death with no cause, and the hint of a search. This is no ordinary case. He fell silent for a moment, his gaze distant, as if he were already seeing the threats of the mystery, invisible to all but him. The quiet of the Athenaeum Club seemed to press in on us, a silence filled with unspoken questions. Finally, he turned to Lady Finch, his decision made. Madam, he said, his voice ringing with a newfound energy that sent a familiar thrill down my spine. Your husband's death presents a challenge of the most unusual and stimulating nature. The official explanation is tidy, but it fails to account for the facts as you have presented them. It is a puzzle, and I am a connoisseur of puzzles." He offered her a rare, reassuring smile. "Rest assured, Lady Finch, I will take your case. I will uncover the truth of how Lord Alistair Finch met his end, even if I have to dismantle the very laws of nature to do so. For I must confess, a case of this nature is not merely a professional duty. It is a profound intellectual necessity." Thank you for listening to Chapter 1 of Sherlock Holmes, Sherlock Holmes and the Case of the Silent Sovereign. If you enjoyed the mystery and want more stories like this, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, leave a comment, and share it with fellow mystery lovers. Your support helps keep the stories alive. See you in the next chapter.